Alright guys, so if you've been getting absolutely wrecked in tier 2 or tier 3 in Megabonk, then this guide is going to be for you. These higher tiers are absolutely no joke. The enemies scale insanely quickly, and if you don't have a solid build or know what you're doing, it's going to feel impossible to clear them. So because of that, I wanted to do a follow-up to my last guide, which was more of a beginner or an introduction guide to Megabonk. I'm going to break down everything I've learned after way too many failed runs, how to survive, how to build properly, and how to actually clear tier 2 and tier 3 without snapping your keyboard in half. Alright, but having said all that guys, let's go ahead and hop into the video. Alright, so before we get too deep into the tips, let's go ahead and go over why it suddenly feels like you're playing a completely different game. When you get to the higher tier difficulties, enemies spawn a lot faster, they hit a lot harder, and they will scale up super quick. When you do finally get to the end boss in tier 3, the bosses start throwing a few actual mechanics at you. Outside of that, they do have AoEs, homing orbs, and interesting movement patterns. RNG actually matters a lot more the further you get into your runs. If the wrong item drops early or doesn't drop at all, your whole build might actually collapse and not be worth taking much further than the first round. On top of all of that, early game matters so much more. This is going to be what sets the foundation for your entire run. And a slow start in a tier 3 run basically means your run is scuffed from the beginning. And finally, that final wave boss. It is completely designed to check to see if your build can actually handle it. The boss will punish glass cannon builds and will make sure you have full faculty of being able to move in this game. Basically, he is a skill check and a build check, and if you're not ready for it, he will mess you up. So yeah, it's not just you, it actually does get kind of hard. So one of the first things I actually want to talk about is going to be the smart target. In the settings mode, there is a thing called enemy targeting. This can change between smart aim and the closest enemy to you. Try playing around with this and figure out which feels more consistent for you. The smart aim does as it says. It selects targets based on the game's AI. It will try to ensure that you're hitting the best target possible. However, this isn't always the best for you in your playstyle. Sometimes you might just want to target the closest enemy, even in a projectile build. And being able to swap this back and forth at your leisure, even during a run, can change up the way things work for you. Do not be afraid to use your R key. The game's controls automatically have a quick restart, and this is on by default. You can just hold the R key in to restart your run at any time. Again, do not be afraid to use this. If you're setting yourself up for a tier 2 or a tier 3 run, you're planning on spending 20 to 30 minutes in your upcoming match. And in all honesty, you can usually tell within the first 60 to 90 seconds if the run is going bad, if you're not getting the items you need, or if you're just not outputting the damage you want and your build is not synergizing or coming together. At the end of the day, there are so many things that can go wrong in that first couple minutes, and there's no reason for you to marry that run. This is probably one of my biggest tips to new players who are trying to get into tier 2 and tier 3. Make sure you restart if you have a scuffed run. So outside of using the R key, one of the other things that I think really messes up a run early on is spreading yourself too thin and not paying attention to what you're doing when it comes time to pick your upgrades. For me, I know that there are typically 1 or 2 weapons that I need to get in order for my build to come online. But in the early stages, if I'm picking the wrong upgrades, picking too many passive upgrades or long-term upgrades, such as a luck tome or a curse tome, I know that I'm setting myself up for failure. At the end of the day, you don't want to be upgrading or choosing too many random things. For me personally, I know that I need to get my weapons online really quick. And the reason I need to do that is every additional weapon I add just increases my DPS. And it is going to increase my DPS more than putting 2 upgrades into a damage tome, which is only modifying 1 weapon. Again, things scale up really quickly, and having enough weapons and subsequently being able to hit enough enemies, that way you can move through the map quickly, farm XP, and scale your build is typically what works for me. The big thing here is just don't spread yourself too thin and don't prioritize those passive items within the first minute or 2 of your round. For me, mobility is absolutely mandatory when it comes to being able to survive tier 2 and tier 3 runs. Outside of having the wrong weapons, the thing that gets me killed the most is not being able to move around. Now, with some characters, that's not that big of a deal. They have a lot of built-in mobility. But for a lot of other characters, they actually have really poor mobility and really poor move speed. So outside of learning how to skate, the other thing you need to really be aware of is making sure that you get a lot of jumps. This will be something that will help you in the very final stage against the boss, but even outside of that, it will help you in a lot of your runs. And honestly, it doesn't matter that much if you're in the forest or the desert. Your ability to reposition, move around, and not get stuck can and will be the difference in a lot of cases between you living or dying. Quite frequently, I see good builds and good runs scuffed because people just cannot get out of the way, and they do not have the mobility to stop themselves from being killed. Moral of the story, make sure to build in the mobility. Now, this tip is something that I think everybody can benefit from, and that is making sure you have some type of defense if you're planning on trying to tackle the final boss at the end of Tier 3. No matter how skilled you are at the game, there are going to be times where you mess up taking on the final boss, and he is very, very, very punishing. So in my view, if you're taking on the final boss, defense is not an option. It doesn't matter to me if you go with shields, regen, lifesteal, armor, whatever fits in your kit. This boss has orbs that hit like freight trains and will track you aggressively. And no matter how hard you try, there is still a good chance that you will get clipped by at least one. Having even a small cushion to help you survive a hit or help you recover can be the difference between you surviving and you throwing an entire 30-minute run in 2 seconds. Moral of the story, make sure you at least build into survivability somehow. I would suggest a tome, but after you've been doing it for a while, you might be able to forego a tome as long as you're picking up survivability out of the charged shrines. Now, timing on shrines and portals is everything. Shrines are absolutely great and can give you a lot of benefits, but if you hit them too early, they can ruin the pacing of your run. A couple big things to keep in mind here is don't go out of your way to double back for a single charge shrine. If you missed one in the corner or you missed one that's really far out of your way and there's nothing else there, you're going to be losing precious time running all the way to that shrine, grabbing it and then running back, especially on your first lap around the map. You want to make sure you're always moving forward and you're always picking up whatever is going to help you and your build and get you online and get your experience up. And backtracking does not do this. Also, do make sure you hit the cross sword shrines. Again, these are just free chests, but you do not want to do them too early. In an ideal world, you want to basically delete these enemies as soon as they pop in. If you're spending 30 seconds or a minute to clear the enemies that are coming out of these, that is just too long and it was not worth your time to kill them. It is much better for you to skip these and come back when your build is up and cooking. Grabbing the boss shrines is another one. If it's the first time playing your build, you're not really gonna know when it comes online. But if you're playing the same build and you're starting to really understand your character and your synergies, you will know when it's safe to hit these. The other thing to keep in mind is how long it is going to take you to kill the final group of bosses for that stage. While your build is online, if you got unlucky, did not get enough cheeses, enough curses, or anything else to help you burn out these bosses, you could find yourself in a situation where you are 30 seconds or a minute into the final swarm on a stage 1 in a tier 3 run, still trying to take out the bosses. This is very high risk, and this can force you to throw a very good, very solid build just because you grabbed too many boss shrines and you waited too late to take them on. The last thing I want to point out is a couple pickups. There are tons of really good pickups in the game and tons of really good items. At the end of the day, really understand what the items in the game are and turn off ones that do not synergize with your build. Also keep in mind a handful of community favorites. Items like the cheese, the wrench, the idle juice box, the backpack, echo shards, the mirror, scarf, the demonic blade, and grandma's secret tonic can really change your build and turn the momentum of any fight. Now, I've only picked a handful of items to highlight, but honestly, there are numerous good items in the game. And while some items are good for certain builds, they may not be good for other builds. So just familiarize yourself with the items and ensure that you turn off ones that do not work with your build. That way you have a good chance of getting the upgrades you want in your tier 2 and tier 3 runs. And out of everything I said, I left off all of the legendaries, as almost every legendary is going to be good and going to improve your build in some way. So now we need to go over the heroes, and I'm going to do this pretty quick as the meta is ever shifting. At the end of the day, the hero that you pick is going to set up your entire kit. Every hero has its own benefits and its own negatives, and you need to find the one that has a playstyle that works well for you. The first thing I would suggest you look at is what the character's weapon is and what its passive skills are. Some characters like Oofy start out with a pretty solid weapon and a really good passive ability. But some of this might not help scale your damage at the end of the round, as armor is going to help survivability but not damage. Others like the bandit also have a really solid starting weapon, and their passive is going to scale their damage. However, they're going to be much squishier when it comes time to fight the final boss. And both of these characters are going to have to be relatively close when it comes time to actually kill the final boss. And that might not be something that works with your playstyle. You might prefer zipping around the map, not being close to anybody, and using a bunch of projectile weapons. And somebody like Calcium might be perfect for your playstyle, as the faster he moves around, the more damage he does, and he uses the bone weapon. Or you might be somebody that likes to go for broke and really enjoys those high risk, high reward characters, in which case somebody like Dicehead might be really good for you. His Gamba perk gives him random upgrades, and sometimes these can be very OP. And outside of that, once his dice come online, he is almost guaranteed to get 100% crit rate on them. Out of everything that we looked at, the main thing is just finding a character that's going to synergize with you and has a playstyle that you like. Because again, who you pick is going to set up the rest of your kit. Now, right now, there are some standout characters. Characters like Calcium and Tony McZumi do a great job in tier 2 and tier 3 runs. Their ability to get in and out of damage is unsurpassed by anybody else. And I would suggest either one of these characters if you're doing a tier 3 run. Outside of that, people do enjoy Mega Chad, and if you build him properly, his aura is actually quite strong. He is a little bit slow, and it's going to make him a little bit frustrating when it comes to the actual final boss, but the whole rest of your run will go pretty smoothly. And if you pick the right accompanying weapons, your fight will not be that terrible when it comes to the final boss. But realistically, even a character like Clank or Bandit do exceedingly well on the final boss. TLDR is that it doesn't really matter who you pick, as long as you enjoy their playstyle and you match up the synergies that you need between their tomes and their weapons. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the tomes. This is, in my view, where 90% of good runs either live or die. Before we get too deep into this, I'm going to go over a couple of tomes and explain what they work with and when you should avoid them. Now, the first tome I want to talk about is going to be the damage tome. This literally works with every build. Realistically, this is a great choice, and you can work this into basically any build that you decide to go with. This is going to scale all of the damage of all of your attacks, and it is honestly a W tome. The next one I want to talk about is going to be the precision tome. This increases your chance to deal critical damage, and if you get more than 100% crit chance, it's actually going to let you over crit, dealing even more damage. We really like this, and we want to use it with weapons like the dice, the katana, the hero sword, or any other weapon that scales critical hit damage. Now, the big thing to be careful with here is if you have no critical hit scaling. If your weapons do not scale up critical hit damage, you should avoid this tome. Also, if you're going to use this tome, try to synergize all of your weapons to really benefit from it. The quantity tome is another tome that I use in a lot of my builds. What this is going to do is this is going to increase the amount of projectiles that you shoot out when you do an attack. Now, this works really well with weapons like the wireless dagger, the hero sword again, the banana, the black hole. Realistically, this pairs up with a ton of different weapons. The one thing you're going to want to be careful with is using this with something like the aura. The aura does not scale off of projectile count, so you would want to avoid using it with something like this. Instead, if you plan on using an aura build, you might want to consider using the cooldown tome. This is going to determine how quick you shoot projectiles and how fast you perform attacks. This is going to be great for any weapon that has a large recharge time between attacks. So things like the black hole, the tornado, and the aura procs are great to synergize with the cooldown tome. And last but not least, we're going to go ahead and talk about the armor tome, the blood tome, the shield tome, the HP tome, and the regen tome. These are all very strong defensive options, and I would consider prioritizing one of these in your build if you're planning on taking on the final boss in tier 3. Now, which one you use is going to depend very much on your build synergies, and your playstyle. So mix and match, try them out, and see which one works best for you. One last thing I want to talk about is going to be the Holy Trinity, or the Cursed Trinity, depending on how you're looking at it. And that is going to be the XP tome, the Luck tome, and the Cursed tome. This trinity is great for deep pushes, especially into final wave runs. But I would suggest that you do not prioritize this in your normal tier 2 or tier 3 runs. While it does scale up, and there are ways to ensure that you are able to scale up with it, it can scale up very slowly, and it can be hard to get online. And because of that, I think you're better off adding other tomes into your build. That way you can scale more efficiently, and you can scale more predictably. And that is going to make your runs much more consistent and get you to your first tier 3 clear. Another thing to notice is if you look at my tomes, you can see that I have a bunch of them turned off. Make sure you use your toggler and you turn off whichever tomes you can that you do not plan on using during your run. This is just going to help ensure that you get your build online quickly and that you're not skipping through a bunch of tomes and wasting time, which is something that is precious and you will not have a lot of in the early stages of your run. And seriously, do not be afraid to banish bad tomes instead of skipping. Once you've spent a couple minutes in the run, if you are not able to get the tome that you want, do not re-roll and then skip. Just go ahead and pick one of the tomes that you know you do not want and banish it and get it out of the rotation. It is going to be RNG on when the tome you want actually shows up, but getting rid of items in the pool is just going to save you a headache. There's nothing worse than re-rolling tons of times, just end up skipping and wasting money and time. So do this and you'll thank yourself later on. So now we're going to dip in a little bit to weapon synergies just to try to help you guys out. This is very much a don't mix oil and water situation. If things do not work well together, you should avoid them for the most part. But like every good rule, there are times when you can break this. But for now, I would avoid it as this is going to be your first couple times trying to get these clears. And you should try to synergize and work with what you know will work together. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is going to be the aura. This is a very, very strong weapon, and if you use it right, it can make your life much easier. This is going to synergize with anything that uses cooldown and any other AoE weapon. One thing I would try to avoid pairing it with would be anything that is going to use the quantity or projectile tome, as neither quantity nor projectile will scale the damage from the aura. Another great weapon to use here is going to be the Aegis. It synergizes really well with the quantity tome, as adding projectiles adds more shields, which increases the amount of damage you can do with it and the amount of protection you get out of it. It also works really well with regen and life steal centric builds, because you can stand there and hold your ground and you don't have to worry too much about taking any additional damage. Now, we spoke about the wireless dagger earlier. With the wireless dagger, consider pairing it up with anything else that you know is going to pair well or scale well with quantity or attack speed. And while we did say be careful pairing this with aura, this is one of those situations where if you know the rule, you can break it as long as it works with your build. The banana works really well with quantity and projectile builds and doesn't do as well if you're going with a pure melee build. The hero's sword works really great with both crit and projectiles, but it is something to be a little bit careful of with slow shield style builds, as its range is quite short, and because of that you're going to be flooded non-stop. So if you do not have weapons to take enemies out at a distance or help keep them pushed back, you could find yourself overwhelmed really quickly. Black hole is another great choice, and it works really well with cooldown and AoE or size. Now, this was originally broken when the game came out, and its hitbox was much larger than it was intended to be, and they have since scaled it down, but it is still a very solid pick. Once you get this up and running, it does pretty solid work, but you will want to be able to get a lot of them out, and there is a little bit of cooldown time between when you start throwing it and your next throw. So for that, we would advise using cooldown. One thing to be careful of is using this when most of your build is only focused on single target, because while this does a good job at the later stages, it is very hard to get up and running, and you will find yourself overwhelmed in the early stages of T1 and T2. One of the other ones I'm going to talk about is going to be Firewalker. Firewalker is another great choice, and this is one that a lot of people enjoy using. It does synergize very well with quantity and cooldown, but you do want to be careful if you're going to be using a build that you just stand still in or you do not move around a whole lot. Even when you scale this up, most of its damage is going to be behind you, and because of that, if you're not constantly moving, there's a really good chance that you could still get overwhelmed on the front side. Honestly, at the end of the day, I could sit here and make an entire video on just weapon synergies and which weapons you should and shouldn't use with each other, but it's going to depend on you, your build, and your playstyle. And what I would tell you would only be a guideline, and even if I gave you something that was a hard rule, you would still be able to break it if you knew what you were doing and it worked with your build. The important part here is just if a weapon feels awful, dump it. Don't force yourself into synergy hell. If you do not like the way a certain weapon is playing, you do not like a certain playstyle, or you just feel that part of your kit is off or takes too long to come online, just cut it and swap out something else, even if you break a rule, if it feels better for you. The best builds flow naturally. They shouldn't feel like you're fighting your own setup. And if you end up with a very solid synergy between your weapons and your tomes, this is going to happen. But even the best synergies can feel bad if it does not fit your playstyle, which is what I've been harping on the whole time. Think of this in terms of roles. You want something for clear, something for sustain, and something for boss damage. Make sure that whatever build you're putting together allows you to cover all of your bases. If you do this and then find synergies within the weapons you pick, you will guarantee yourself success and you will enjoy your runs much more. So for the tier 2 and tier 3 map and boss tips, this is actually going to be a pretty short segment in the video. We've went over a lot of this in our last guide, but we are going to give you a couple additional tips just to help you on these maps if it's your first time seeing a tier 2 or a tier 3. During your runs, you want to move smart. You never want to stop moving, and you never want to stop collecting experience or upgrades. While there can be times to stop and farm just to be able to buy an upgrade off of a hat vendor, for the most part, you want to keep pushing forward. At some point during your run, you will get a magnet, which will suck up a lot of that experience, so don't worry about it. Also, when you're pathing around, make sure you're breaking vases and doing everything you can to increase your XP. Look at the environment and plan your shrine routes early. Don't get cornered into chasing shiny loot. While you might see a lone charge shrine in the corner, it doesn't always make sense to run over and grab it, as we said before. Doing that is just going to cost you time in your run and give you a bunch of dead space where you're not collecting anything of any use and you're just killing enemies as you walk by. Also be careful jumping down to grab loot or grabbing loot at disadvantageous times. It's very easy to think your build has come online and try to grab a charge shrine, a Moa shrine, or a gold chest right when a swarm hits or right when a mini boss spawns. And if you're not paying attention, you could have put yourself in a bad spot, which will allow you to get one shot or 1 or 2 tapped and end your entire run. Trust me, I know, because it happens to me all the time. When you're moving around the map, use your slopes and your jumps to keep your momentum. We've talked about bunny hopping numerous times, and we've talked about multiple jumps. Make sure to prioritize this to get around the map swiftly. But do be careful, because there are times when you get too much momentum and you can plow right into an enemy and take a lot of damage. Learning how to use the movement tech, learning how to read the maps, and learning how to keep up your momentum will ensure that even on the slowest character, you're able to do a full lap around the map, collect a ton of loot, and still have 4 to 5 minutes to go back and figure out anything that you have not done, or go start knocking out all of those challenge shrines. And speaking of the challenge shrines or the cross sword shrines, definitely save those for when your build comes online. We talked about this earlier, but again, you do not want to find yourself in a situation where you're spending way more time clearing these than you need to. Before you leave a map, make sure to take some time and hang out by the portal. You can farm the final wave for typically up to a minute as long as your build is online, and that is just going to be a bunch of extra experience. There are numerous ways to do this, but one of the best ways to do it is literally just to stand in front of the shrine and kill things as they flood you, and then walk out and try to grab a little bit of that XP. Now, we're not talking about dozens of levels, but this can net you 3 to 5 levels between runs, and that can make your life much, much easier when you go into the next stage. And last but not least, make sure when you're moving around the map and your build is coming online to hit the little skulls. Those will give you a 5% difficulty bump, and those bumps will make it much easier for you to farm XP. Now, don't do them if your build can't sustain it, but if your build can, constantly push up the difficulty level, which will ensure you're getting even more XP. So now we're going to talk about the final boss, and this will be spoilery. So if you do not want to hear about the final boss, I would go ahead and click off the video now, because everything from here on is going to be talking about the final boss and doing a quick recap. So you have been warned. Now, when you get to the final boss, he is going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass. He will take all of your weapons, but your main primary weapon that comes on your character. So while you have been grinding through the levels up to this point, you will have wanted to prioritize upgrading your main weapon, as it is going to be the first weapon you start out with. When the boss spawns, you're going to try to burn him out with your primary weapon, and you're going to want to try to avoid him. The best thing to do here is to just keep circling the boss and keep doing as much damage as you can. When you get him down to about a quarter health, he will stop and spawn some totems in. Now, these totems need you to stand in them in order to bring them down and lower his shield. And yes, wrenches do work to speed this up. So it does not hurt to have a nice little stack of wrenches just to make this part a little bit faster. Now, while you're standing in here, he's going to be shooting orbs out at you, and he's going to be doing ground attacks. All of this is very, very painful and can be very tough to avoid. Even if you're very good at avoiding some of his attacks, the orbs kind of change that up, because they can come out of nowhere and bump you in a direction that you're not planning on going, which will get you hit and could get you one shot. And this is why having all of that extra survivability matters. You will get hit, so plan on it. The red orbs are by far probably the worst orbs that he has. These will chase you aggressively, and they seem to go at the last position you were at when they decided to move. So because of that, moving and keeping moving is going to help you out. If you end up in a situation where your movement slows, but you are still moving, there's a good chance that the red orbs will still hit you because you will not get out of the way before they transition to where you quote unquote were. When you see red orbs in the air, a good thing to do here is just to avoid trying to grab any of the totems at that time, because you need to spend most of your energy just trying not to get hit by these. Also, make plans on using your lifesteal or regen when you need to. The boss is a tank, but if you have a decent build, you will be able to burn him out within 5 to 7 minutes. So you do have a little bit of leeway here to take your time and to regen or get some life back instead of just pressing on. Make sure to do this because this will save your 35-minute run. Another thing to do is pay attention to his big abilities. He doesn't constantly spam them, and there is a little bit of time from one attack to the other. And if you're having issues getting to a shrine just due to where it's placed and you not having enough mobility and jumps, or for whatever reason you just keep getting bumped off of it, wait until after he uses his abilities to go for it and use that downtime to try and pick up those hard to reach shrines. All right, guys, and that was basically everything you needed to know. So we're going to go over a couple things really quick just to finish up the video. Make sure you do not over upgrade or overspread your upgrades too early. Prioritize getting those weapons on board and then pump your tomes. Don't skip your defenses if you're planning on trying to take the boss. You do not want to be one shot and scuff an entire 30 to 40 minute run. Do not nuke your economy with endless rerolls early on. If you're not getting what you want within your first minute, go ahead, use the R key and re-roll. There's no reason to continue on with no economy and without the items that you actually want. Do not build crit if you do not have crit weapons. This is one big one. Crit can be nice and can be useful, but if your weapons aren't scaling crit damage, you're not doing yourself any favor by getting crit. Prioritize raw damage at that point. And no matter what, do not activate boss shrines or cross sword shrines before your build comes online or before you know that you can take them out. This is a surefire way to throw a run, so do not do it. And that's it. That's everything you need to know about my tier 2, tier 3 survival guide. If this helps you stop dying every 5 minutes, consider liking and subscribing for more Megabonk content as well as other game coverage in the future. But guys, thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.